Hello, my name is Magdalena Kicińska. I'm an editor-in-chief Pismo Magazyn, and I'm very honored to be able to sit here to host this talk and to most of all to be a part of discussion with those two great poets, great women. First of all, I want to say that I'm really sorry for my English today, but today even my Polish is barely existing, so I hope I will stand up to the task. And I want to start, of course, with introduction. We were supposed to be here. 4 women. We are free, but not with the freedom. There are 3 of us here, and on my left there's Iryna Ciłyk, the poet, of course, the director, the activist from Ukraine, and the person who is really involved in the subject of our discussion, actually, with taking poetry as also a tool, maybe a weapon, maybe some kind of guard that can protect us from the evil. So thank you very much for coming. And I have here somewhere, I have one of 2 books that those who are willing to, can take home for free. They're outside in the corridor. You can take these publications provided to us by Versopolis and Iryna Ciłyk, Czerwona Strefa, the Red Zone, translated by the great translators Aneta Kamińska, who's also here today with us, and Bogdan Zadura. And I really encourage you to start to take a first step in your knowledge of Iryna's work by this publication. So welcome again, and I think that a huge round of applause at the very beginning to Iryna for coming and being with us here.
Thank you. That's my big pleasure to be here, and I will be very sincere with you. I'm so glad to be in Poland now. You know, I've changed my attitude to many things, especially during last few months. Actually, the whole my life has changed, and I was so surprised by this huge wave of support. You know, a few weeks ago, I was at Cannes Film Festival. I was one of the members of the jury of Documentary Prize. And suddenly I met Polish actress Joanna Kulig, who acted in Cold War by Pawlikowski. I've never met her before, but we hugged each other like, I don't know, like family. And I also told her that I was so impressed by the support of Poles. And she told me, you know, but we are family. I've never thought about that like in that sense, but we are. And I feel the same now. And I'm very glad to be with you guys to talk about some important things. I should confess, I feel quite speechless, and I don't have any answers to some complicated questions, but maybe we can try to find them together, because discussions, dialogues matter, and I still believe in this power of conversations. So yes, that is my pleasure.
And I hope that we will make this space like maybe not family-like, but maybe talk with the partners. So that's why there isn't any, a wall between us. There isn't any scene. So it's really an invitation to this talk, to this conversation with you. And maybe we even won't, spread the meeting like for our discussion and your Q&A. Just if you feel something, you will be moved by something, just raise a hand, just to have some kind of basic order, and let's talk about what moves us. I hope that you will find something that will move you. And on my right, I have another great book, also the publication provided us by Versopolis, and I once again encourage all of you to get your own copy. Eka Kewaniszwili, Ostatnia Runda, the final tribute, translated from Georgian by several people. From the Georgian, okay. A z gruzińskiego, and I switched, sorry, it's really not my best day. Magda Nowakowska from Georgian to Polish. And as we established by my mistake, our second guest is from Georgia. You are a great journalist with multi-talents in radio and press and print as well, awarded by your journalistic work, but also a poet. You wrote 5, if I recall properly, 5 poetry books. And in 2014, you received the greatest Georgian prize. Yeah, but so I'm also very honored that you agreed to come to join our conversation, because this idea of sitting here with a poet from Ukraine and poet from Georgia, and as we were supposed to with a poet from Syria, so the countries, the places that both in past and in present are suffering because of the war and are experiencing it day by day, it itself just bring the topic of war and poetry and the connections between up front for me. So that's why this discussion have this angle. But I'm also very, very glad and pleased that you are here with us.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I don't know is it working now? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Hello to everybody, and thanks for coming. And I want to continue somehow Irina's words, that I also feel like I'm among friends. Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe because of our past, maybe because our struggles, because our attitudes to Russia, maybe, I don't know, or what's going on today. But I feel very comfortable. I feel comfortable to be with you and to talk about things. About I do not have recipes, you know. I really do not have recipes, but again, as Iryna mentioned, let's try to find answers, because for us, for poets, for people whose main job is writing, really words are the main weapon. Yeah, that's true what I can say, and so let's try to answer your questions.
But before the questions, I would love to hear one of your poems read, like right now.
I still have doubts. Should we read in our native languages or maybe in English? I'm not sure.
Native. I also encourage the native origin.
You know, I prepared the poem about freedom, etc. But the very last moment, I changed my mind. I decided to read the poem "Червона зона", "Червона штрафа", that gave the title for this booklet. This poem is about fears, and you know, I found myself very scared and useless and powerless during last months, and I was so brave and active during last 8 years. I focused on the time of war in everything that I've been doing: poetry, documentary, fiction, films. I was observing different people affected by war, but when the war came to my city, that was some other experience, and it really changes your attitude, your perspective on everything. I didn't believe till the very last moment that it could be possible, you know? Till the very last morning. I mean, that 24th of February, I had some, I don't know, other optics to look at everything. And then when my husband woke me up and told me that Kyiv is under bombings, it changed my life completely. And I still can't write anything, I can't film anything, and I don't have any answers, as I told before. And I want to read you a short poem, Червона зона, because red zone is not only the zone where hostilities take place, it's also the space where people live under the shadow of an every minute threat. And as to me, it's also the zone of some borderline sensations, because, you know, this feeling of insecurity is actually key for people of my generation in Ukraine, and not only Ukraine. Because we talked to Eka that I came to Georgia first time in my life in 2008 in July. Then I came back home, and 1 month after the war has started in Tbilisi and in Georgia, and I was so shocked and impressed, but I've never expected that we could have the same experience in my country. And since that time, so many, I don't know, everything has changed, but this feeling of insecurity is following us, Ukrainians, Georgians, Poles as well, and it affects our lives, and it's dangerous. But the poem is actually quite intimate, and it is written from some female perspective. Червона зона. Їдучи в червону зону, щоразу ловлю себе на винятковій ретельності у підготовці власного тіла. Акуратно голю все зайве, довго маюся з нігтями, обираю хорошу нижню білизну. Так готуються до особливо інтимної зустрічі. Ніколи не знаєш, хто тебе роздягатиме, можливо, навіть сьогодні, говорила моя бабуся, маючи на увазі щось своє. Я також маю на увазі щось своє. Я теж не можу не думати про ймовірне побачення з тією коханкою, яка має холодні очі, вологі пальці і волосся, що пахне чорними луговими квітами. Давай не сьогодні, кажу, прошу, не сьогодні. Вона довго мовчки сміється, і щось червоне видніється на її зубах. Але сьогодні я роздягаюся сама.
Translated by Eka Kewaniszwili. Here, yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, since I'm reading in Georgian, I will read a little more rhythmic poem. This was written about living of love, but now, after several years, it was written. I have a feeling that this poem has also symbolic meaning. What happens when love and peace and friendship and empathy leaves people. So, წასვლა. ფეხაკრეფით, როგორც თოვლი თებერვალში. გადაკვეთავს ქარის სეზონს, ტალახიანს. სუბსარქისი მიასრისავს მთის ძირებთან. როგორც ბოლო მგზავრი ბაქანს მოფრიალე ცხვირსახოცით გვიან მატარებელს ატანს წინა ღამის მაჯისცემას. ჩაწყვეტილი ერთი ვენით, ნელა. მობარბაცე ბოლო ლოთი როგორც ტოვებს ანახევროთ ალაგებულ ჭირის სუფრას და სტუმარი გადაქანცულ დიასახლის რიჟრაჟამდე უსარგებლო ქებას უთვლის. მიდის ასე, დნება როგორც ვერცხლი თითზე სიბერემდე მკერდით ანზე იპარება. სიკვდილის წინ როგორც ძაღლი უთმობს სადარაჯო ეზოს სხვა ძაღლს და ლასლასით მიმავალი გზაზე ნაღლობს პატრონების გადაკარგვას ფრთხილად. სული შეგუბებით, როგორც დედა, ხურავს ჩვილის ოთახის კარს, როცა სძინავს. როგორც ქურდი ჯიბესავსე სხვისი ფული, სხვისი მომავალი დარდით გარბის უხმოთ ქალაქიდან ასე ურცხვად. სხვა გულების დასახრეტავს მიმდის გული. გაშვებამდე ჯადოქრული ძალით ვაცმევ შენს ნაჩუქარ ფრთიან წაღებს. შელოცვით რომ ხვალ დაბრუნდნენ, გზა იციან, რომ დაბრუნდნენ, რომ დაბრუნდნენ. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you both said that you don't have any answers for me, and I think that maybe it's not the point of this meeting to find the answers. Maybe it's not our job to find them. Maybe our job is to ask the questions, to simply to think about the issues that other people don't have on their agenda because it's not the areas of expertise. But what I meant when I was trying to form the main idea, main question, main topic for this meeting was that the language of poetry and the language of war, I cannot think about any two things that are so opposite to each other. And when I think about the poetry, it's, for me, personally, it's all about the perceiving of the beauty of the connection, human connection, connection to the nature, something that we have to protect, that we want to protect. And when I think about the war, it's all about destroying what's important, destroying the connections, destroying those intimate moments that we all share as humans in connection to ourselves or in connection to the other parts of the nature. So maybe the first question, and once again, I don't expect you to give me a straight answer, it's more about exchanging the ideas and the points of view, is the question of how do you, as a poet, as someone whose main tool is the language, find your language today, or you cannot find the language, as you said, Iryna, at the beginning. Do you still know how to express your emotions, your thoughts with everything that's going on?
You know, during these last 8 years, I've changed my attitude to the question, does art, not only poetry, have some sense, some power in the times of war? I've changed my attitude many times because sometimes I felt that it does, and I saw this with my own eyes, how poetry, films, different arts change people, how they make some very important bridges between people, emotional bridges. And for example, I took part in many literary readings in the war zone, especially in the first years of war. And sometimes when we were reading to civilians, to military volunteers, that was such a huge feeling that we break some ice between us, and people were crying and laughing and hugging each other. So I had a feeling that yes, it matters and we build something important all together. But sometimes I feel that all this language of art is so useless when we are focused on these basic needs, you know, this hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy, yes? That the lowest needs are physiological needs and needs of safety. So when you think how to protect your child, how to be alive, how to survive, usually you can't do something more. I'm observing people around me in Ukraine now, and most of them, they say that they don't read books anymore, they don't watch films, they don't do things that usually they have as a basic needs for them. I mean, all these intellectuals, poets, writers, filmmakers, because maybe they are so traumatized now, I don't know. Probably we need some time and distance, because when you are in the middle of this situation that destroys you on different levels, especially on that subtle levels, maybe you need to survive first, and then you will have some new perspective to reflect, and that is very important to reflect actually on all that experience. But at the moment, so many Ukrainian artists joined the army or became volunteers or fled to other countries, trying to save their children. And it seems like we are speechless, but I hope that it will change then, later, when we will have some new power to do that. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel that many colleagues, many friends of mine feel the same.
It can be a poetry tool, or this is the question, right? First of all, I want to say one thing. Recently, we had a friendly conversation among my colleagues, Georgian poets, which is better if a poet stays in her own space, not crossing the border and writing about very poetic things, or when he or she appears to the barricades, you know, and to express his very sharp civil opinions and so on, because I'm that kind of poet, and very often they say, oh, Eka is like very social, and sometimes they say it in a critical discourse, yeah. But you know, then in this conversation I said one thing, now I think like this, maybe it will change in the future, that what we see now, what's going on in our country, in neighboring countries, and in all over the world, I don't know how can we stay, how to say it in English, sterile, no, steriluri, how it will be, how to say
neutral?
Yeah, neutral, like to stay only in your space and not have reaction, not to express. How can you stay silent, for example, and write about birds and butterflies and so on? But in the beginning, when I, like 20 or 25 years ago, when I began writing during my first steps in poetry, I couldn't imagine that these words, battle, fight, can be somehow related to the poetry, because I was writing about very personal, internal things, and love, and childhood nostalgia, or I don't know. But then things changed very much, because I grew up and I looked around and I saw that, oh, here is greedy government, here is unfair church, here is femicide, here is, I don't know, so many things. And the language, not because of the war, because we have other kinds of wars around us. And, well, for me, it happened so that I began, how to say, I decided to shoot my poems like a gun, yeah. And till now, it continues so. It happened naturally, you know, because I'm a poet of reactions, and so many bad things going on around that I could not stay and say that, oh, I'm a poet, I will write about sun or something like this. So yes, again, answer is sometimes poetry becomes a tool, a gun, a fight, fight instrument, I think.
But it was your completely internal motivation, or do you feel like you as a poet, especially in that kind of situation, also have some kind of responsibility to react, to use your tools, your workshop as effectively as you could?
You know, well, maybe the reason here is again very personal, because I'm not only a poet, but I'm a reporter. It's already 25 years. I'm a reporter of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. I cover war, like this kind of things every day. If I do not have luxury to sleep or not to read news, and so these are so great emotions when you're writing, when you're shooting, when you are editing, that you have to you need space to to put these emotions somewhere. And they flew to the poems, but in a way of protest, you know. in a way of very sharp words, to say so. Yeah.
And do you see it as some kind of responsibility to use what you can provide to the zone or to the people who were affected in Donbass in the past and now are being affected by what's going on? Or do you feel like in some kind of maybe not a limbo, but somewhere in between those feelings that you have to respond, you have to be active, like, I don't know, our finalist Kateryna Kaletko, which we spoke before the discussion, that she's, I think, on the edge of exhaustion because she's so active, so involved in almost a war zone with the providing weapons and so on and so on. So,
talking really frankly, I don't think that I should do something or some other poets must react somehow, because we are selfish people and we try to save ourselves. That is our first need. And in fact, poetry exists for such a small bubble of people. Maybe I'm wrong, but that is my perspective. But at the same time, talking about myself, poetry used to be one of my basic needs, like safety and, I don't know, food, air. And yes, I don't read and I don't write poetry now, but I know that it's one of the most important tools and needs for me. And when I was talking about this building emotional bridges between people, it's really important to at least to try. And of course, reading to some poetry from the past, it gives me the feeling that everything repeats. And people from, for example, poets, other people from 20th century, they had the same experience. And it's important to know that on the one hand, we walk in circles, but on another hand, everything will be finished, the war will be over, and we will survive. And you know, I was translating Winston Hugh Auden's poems right before this full-scale invasion has started. And I was so impressed again how all these things repeat again and again, because I was translating his poems that he wrote in 1930s, in the end of 30s, and that poems were full of anticipation of a big war which is coming, and especially two poems, Refugees Blues and What Is That Sound? If you haven't read it, that is my advice, to reread it or read it for the first time, because I was so shocked that all these people that lived 100 years ago, they felt the same. And now we have the same trials, the same challenges. So it's important to know that we are connected with people from the past, with people from the future, probably. So I don't know if poetry is a weapon for me, but yes, it saves me, it saves many people like me. So it matters, and I still believe in poetry.
And when it comes to believing in the power of poetry, do you, and also to mention my short introduction to this meeting, do you believe that those kind of bridges, like you said, can be built between the aggressor and the victim of the aggression? Is this poetry that powerful that we can use it as we were talking about the dialogue with an enemy, that we are all sick of dialoguing and making a platform, but in the same time, do you both think that this is possible to use it as this kind of way to start the conversation in the future, when hopefully it will come soon, that the
You mean
war.
poetry?
Yeah.
I don't know. We tried several times, for example, with Abkhazians. You know, part of Georgia, Abkhazia is now occupied by Russia, and we don't have any relations, very little relations with these people. We don't know what they think. They don't know what we think. They perceive us enemies. We don't, but still, there is no connections. There are no connections, but. We tried several times in the frame of some projects, I don't know, some institute tried this to work together, like Abkhazian poets and Georgian poets, and we translated their poems, and also our Georgian poems were translated, but it finished there. But I only can say that I hope that one day these, what words to use, I don't know, the bridge is too much, I do not have this feeling, but one day these words became the first bricks for these bridges. But I'm very hopeless, to say frankly, now today.
Because you both said that, poetry is about also defining those similarities between us as human beings. We have all the same set of emotions, the same set of reactions to the world, to what's going on. So it's supposed to be easier to find those connections when it comes to reading poetry, writing poetry, which is, for me, poetry is an invitation to explore together the same words, the same set of words, by very different views, but still meeting in the same conversation.
But how to speak with the enemy, with the poetry, if you mean the enemy? How to speak with the poetry, I don't know really. But you mentioned, and now I remember, that you were waiting for Russian artists and poets,
to speak up,
art people to write at least a word on Facebook when war began. Yeah.
I'm probably too traumatized to talk about possible dialogues with my Russian colleagues now, because in fact we had different attempts of dialogues during last 8 years at least. And we had so many round table discussions, so many, I don't know, meetings, workshops, where we had some chances to have conversations, to share our art to each other, but it didn't work. And yes, I was really not even disappointed, it's not the right word, but during this last winter, when all of us, we lived in this anticipation of full-scale invasion, I was waiting for some kind of reactions, words, at least words, from the side of my Russian colleagues, because I had some of them, and I was checking their Facebook pages and some other, and all of them were silent. You know, as to me, silence is also some kind of a crime. And yes, I told before that we don't have to do something. It's actually the matter of our personal choice, but at the same time, silence is a choice too. And I was really disappointed by many of them, because I still believed in these people, but they were probably too afraid, and I can understand them, because it's really scary to be active and to talk loudly in Russia, but at the same time my Ukrainian colleagues die for freedom. So it's some kind of different levels. So I still want to believe that one day we will have some field for new dialogues, but first the war should be over. Russia should admit their guilt, and in fact all these representatives of Russian culture, they also should admit that they are guilty somehow on some levels, because it's impossible to be, I mean, I believe in some collective guilt, and especially it matters to Russian culture.
Yeah, you mentioned silence. Silence is a how did you say? Is a choice. Silence is a choice, and I'd add that attitude is a choice as well. The attitude, and I can't talk now about the bridges when these people come to Georgia, for example, and lots of Russians flew in Georgia during this war because of different seasons. And you know, they the attitude is kind of that the Georgia is kind of gubernia or a part of Russia. You know, you are talking to them in Georgian or in English, and they are talking to you with the Russian. Yes, language matters now as well, I think, and I could not talk with my poetry, and I don't want to build bridges with them now, at least now. Mm-hmm. So maybe this is very radical, but this is frank feeling.
I told you before our... Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
I thought about not building bridges between... I thought maybe it's... the bridges should be somewhere else, like not between poets or artists. Maybe I had this probably utopian idea that maybe, having more poets in politics could be somehow this bridge that art could be, that poems can be. Can you see somehow that working out? Or maybe some other places where those bridges could be?
In politics, you mean? Can it be in politics?
Yes, well, that's my vision, a utopian vision. But
it depends how Russia will act, how they will like look at us. If he looks at us as like former Soviet Union countries that we don't want, then I don't know. One day maybe we can be peaceful neighbors, but they don't want. We have different history. Now, today, we can say 20% of Georgia is occupied, and every day, like, you know, where I live in Tbilisi, it's outside of the city center. In 20 kilometers, they are staying, these Russian troops. How, I don't know. Now, Georgian people's attitude is very, very disappointed and frustrated that it does not depend on us. It depends on them.
I'm not sure that I understood the question right, but did you ask about more poetry on political level? That I would prefer, you know, to have more poets, philosophers, intellectuals in that political, but we have what we have. Usually we don't have strong poets among them. So who knows, maybe it could change the world, but...
In Katarzyna Kalitko essay, there is this sentence that we, poets, she's talking in the first person, we are in this world because we are those readers who can do great, crazy stuff that other normal people who are not poets, who are not artists, would be too afraid to start. So maybe if we will start to see people in power who have something to say because before they read, they experienced, they were open to art, maybe they will be more open to different way of thinking and different way of talking. But I think that, like you said in your question, it is an utopia to think that will come, but we can dream about utopia or make the utopia for ourselves.
But I think in this context that somehow what is happening now and these voices that we hear of poets, of artists, This is an incredible momentum, very hard because, you know, the situation is extremely hard. But this is a momentum where the Ukrainian culture is being decolonized. We hear the voices. We want to hear the Ukrainian voices. We want to, you know, understand, you know, the history of Ukraine, of Ukrainian artists. We want to see them. I think that, you know, in all the speechlessness of the situation, this is exactly where we need poets, where we need artists, we need the testimonies, and I think it's very political, you know. So I'm not think like I don't think that the politics is happening, you know, on the stages of the governments. I think that this is exactly here where we hear right now, and it's happening right now. So I really think that your utopia is just happening here.
Here in between us. And yesterday I was in Germany. It was a very special conference, Polish-German Media Days, and we have this opening lecture that was hosted by Natalka Śniadanko. And she prepared the speech, which was very touching, very moving. Also, she, while speaking, got emotional, and it's obvious. It would be strange not to get emotional with what you are experiencing. And it was a very personal story. And she was sharing the experiences of being a refugee and of being in between past, in between what was, and in between when the situation of being the refugee will end, because she doesn't know when it ends. Of course, we hope it will end as soon as possible, but she doesn't know right now. And she was mentioning those like flashbacks from packing and from fleeing Ukraine, and she said, for me the poetry happened yesterday during her speech, because she said that in our backpacks, the things that we collect to bring to Poland and then to Germany was a collection of very strange things. She said that I'm still shocked what I packed, because, for example, I packed the, sorry, I don't know the proper English word, nebulizator, the thing that when you have flu, it would take your from the nose. So she got this. It's not like the first from the Maslow pyramid, the first thing that you will say. She said also that she took one of the board games, the family board games, but she said it's not even the one that we like the most. It was just the one that we gathered to pick up and took it with us. And she made this short list of those strange things that made a home, the things that you don't usually notice, the things that are not very special, the things that they are obvious that they are there. And while speaking, I was seeing my colleagues on the audience. Some of them were crying, some of them were very moved. But the people who were, I think most of us on the audience, Poles and Ukrainians, and Natalka, the speaker, was viewing, and we were all kept our eyes on our German colleagues and German politicians, because they were there yesterday and they were listening, and they were, after the speech, they were asked by us and by German journalists as well, what are your reactions? What will you do after hearing what Natalka Śniadanko just told with very literally beautiful way? Because it wasn't a short story, it wasn't a fictional story. She was sharing her own experience. You could see how moved she was, and it was so honest, so deep, so rooted in her pain and in the misery that she's dealing with. And most of the times we just heard the silence as the answer, because they couldn't bear, I think they couldn't bear the responsibility. But I agree with you that the politics was happening there because of the power of her speech, and because also the power of the words. And sharing this personal experience. So I think that maybe this is also the platform that with sharing the experience.
And now, you know, I had now deja vu about this story, packing the backpack, because why? I will tell you. And the first poem I wrote about the August War was about my backpack, what I was putting in this. It's just, telepathy, I think. You know why? My block, where I live, this building stands, is near military road. So if anybody wants to come in Tbilisi, tanks or somebody, I don't know, military machines, they should cross this central road, which is next to my block. And the second day of when war began in Georgia, it was August 9. Me and my daughter, we lived then alone. She was 4 years old, and I was just looking from the window. It was night. And suddenly, first I heard a voice, some strange voice, and then I saw that, like, I don't know, 50 or 100 tanks are coming on this road. It was very unnatural picture, because the second day all road was destroyed, you know, after... And I saw that my neighbors were throwing the backpacks and everything from their windows, sitting their cars and going somewhere. I did not have a car, and I have a 4-year-old child sleeping in her bed. So yes, I didn't know whose tanks they were. Then appeared they were Georgians backing in the city from Tsilyk region, but till I saw the Georgian flag on the text, I don't know, I can't now tell you this feeling, but again, I began packing my backpack, and you can't imagine what kind of things was there, and why I remembered this. The first poem I wrote after 10 years of the war, again, was about this backpack.
I'm sorry, I need to add this because I have a poem in this booklet which is called Emergency Suitcase. Aneta knows because she has translated the poem. It's about the list of weird things that we can put into our... So we have the same experience, some of us, with the same traumas.
Could you read the poem?
Yeah, I can read it, and I will read it in English maybe. Or do you understand Ukrainian, all of you?
Yes. Okay. We will learn. That's our responsibility right now.
Actually, I understand Polish quite well. I just can't speak, unfortunately, but I understand, I don't know, 90% of what are you talking about. Тривожна валізка. У твоїй тривожній валізці є все необхідне. Старі квитки, книги, листи, горнятко з відбитим вушком, дончина порцелянова балерина, грубий альбом зі світлинами, пачворкова ковдра, зшита зі старих маминих суконь, батьків бінокль, колекція марок, так і недописана дисертація, коробка з ялинковими прикрасами, наївний живопис далекого родича і пакуночок звіробою, зібраного власноруч на знайомій галявині. Усе дбайливо спаковано, усе під рукою. Ніколи не знаєш, що знадобиться в наступній подорожі до самого себе.
I think I also understand Ukrainian, you know, because during these last 3 months I translated so many news and things. Yeah.
And right now I would, I want you maybe once again to collectively try to find an answer to the question is, do you mentioned that many people around you cannot read books, cannot watch movies, are close in they have really the perspective closed because they have so much to worry that they don't have a space for fictional stories. But do you read poems written by others at that point in time? Do you find some kind of hope, some kind of light, maybe in other words of others?
At the moment, it's too painful for me. For example, when I see some poems by Katerina Kalitko in Facebook, friends, I know that it will be tough experience for me almost every time. Or some other poets that I really like and inspire by their poetry. So, but I believe that I need some time. And also looking at the past, at the experience from the past, I know that we will probably have huge wave of new literature, films, etc. But after, because usually we need some distance. And when you see everything, I will speak as a filmmaker, in close-up, it's too difficult to be. But at the same time, it's also important to fix some moments right now, because we change so fast and our attitude changes so fast to different things. And also I told before that it's so important to put someone else's shoes and to understand what other person experienced. For example, I'm also the filmmaker, and I've shot the documentary film about the family, single mother and 4 kids who lived in the red zone in Donetsk region. And I was observing them for 1 year. And actually the film is also quite poetic, and even the title is a quote of Paul Éluard. It is "The earth is blue as an orange." That is an example of surrealism in art, because I felt that they live in the frontline zone where the reality is so surreal. I mean, these parallel dimensions of war and peace cross each other in so strange, weird forms. But what I'm trying to say, that I had a huge empathy to my characters, but only this winter I realized what my character experienced when I became that mother who is looking at my own kid. He was shaking because he was so scared. We were sitting on the floor of the corridor and listening to really loud sounds of shellings from outside. So actually I lost my thought. I don't remember what I was trying to tell you. No, I can't read poetry, but I believe I will do that soon. I hope so.
Because this is the, like you said, this choice between capturing the moments, the emotion here and now, and taking a distance to have the perspective. So both things count. It's, of course, very, I think, also like a writer and an artist to capture those moments, even if like 2 months later or a year later, I will, open my notebook and decide that nothing is worth, writing down again. But then I will have the right, maybe not the right, but the accurate, the proper a version of a sketch of what I was feeling that time. And then after the time passes, I won't have this connection to myself from there and then. So that's why I was...
Yeah, and by the way, poetry has this power to conserve some moments better than other arts. For example, prose or films that need time. But poetry, it can catch the moment, some small moments of beauty in all this, I don't know, strange surrounding. And I adore poetry for this power.
Well, as for me, I do not have any other way, I'd say, so not to read. First reason is very many Georgian poets, contemporary poets, they wrote wrote poems about Ukrainian war. Very good ones, by the way. In spite of the thing that me too, I think that it needs time. Time should be passed and then. But they are, all of them are my Facebook friends, and I I read. And another reason, again, is my profession. I could not close my eyes and sleep. I have this disease to know, to read, to look at everything. So yes. I'm reading. It somehow helps me to find what other people think about what's going on. You know what? For example, I'm not activist here, like civil activist. I'm a journalist. Yeah, there is a red line between activism and journalism, and I can't write every day or can say "Slava Ukraini" like this. So this is the way. Poems is the way to express myself, and for my colleagues poets, for them it's also the way to say something and not to stay silent. So I understand them as well. And also I wanted to say something. I also lost the meaning, but it's okay. It's sometimes a shield, that I wanted to say, like to reading. To read the poetry.
And I once again encourage all of you, all of us, to use poetry as that kind of weapon, because this is the strength that we can provide our brothers and sisters in Ukraine right now and in other parts of the world as well. To read, to try to catch up if we didn't do it before, to do our homework is also our responsibility now to read and to spread that kind of messages, that kind of language. And the poems written both by our beloved guest here, I received the sign that we have to end this discussion like here in this platform, but I hope that maybe in smaller groups we can still have this conversation. But now, as officially, I have to close this meeting. Thanking once again both ladies for coming here and for reading poetry and for being here with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you. You know what? For example, I'm not activist here, like civil activist. I'm a journalist. Yeah, there is a red line between activism and journalism, and I can't write every day or can say "Slava Ukraini" like this. So this is the way. Poems is the way to express myself, and for my colleagues poets, for them it's also the way to say something and not to stay silent. So I understand them as well. And also I wanted to say something. I also lost the meaning, but it's okay. It's sometimes a shield, that I wanted to say, like to reading, to read the poetry.
And I once again encourage all of you, all of us, to use poetry as that kind of weapon, because this is the strength that we can provide our brothers and sisters in Ukraine right now and in other parts of the world as well. To read, to try to catch up if we didn't do it before, to do our homework is also our responsibility now to read and to spread that kind of messages, that kind of language. And the poems written both by our beloved guest here, I received the sign that we have to end this discussion like here in this platform, but I hope that maybe in smaller groups we can still have this conversation. But now, as officially, I have to close this meeting. Thanking once again both ladies for coming here and for reading poetry and for being here with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you.